I'm talking with the very influential Mayor Bottoms right here. So let's get into your background, you know, so the world gets to know you more. We know you're in Atlanta. We got a lot of love for you, but I'm hearing some things when I start doing my research, like, and I didn't know you wanted to be an R&B singer. I mean, was it like Total? Or is it like Mariah Carey? Like, what would you going for? I don't know. I'm trying to.
When I tell you I have no rhythm, like I'm a complete freak of nature.
Right.
My daddy was, they, say he was a better dancer than he was a singer.
Right.
I was looking at my mom, I'm like, you messed me up. Like, I didn't get none of that. So I'm a like align it with, well, I used to love Natalie Cole. So in my mind, we were gonna be Nat King Cole and Natalie Cole.
Right.
But I didn't live up to my part. And I will never forget, just before my dad passed, Mariah Carey had a song out. And then he heard me singing. He was like, "Baby, you really can't sing, can you?" I said, "No." He said, "Come over here a few days a week." He's like, "I can teach you how to sing." So he had started giving me some singing lessons.
Ooh. Shouts out to Daddy for that. So I didn't realize your dad was an R&B singer.
Yeah, so that's him right behind me.
Okay.
Major Lance. So you got to Google him on YouTube.
Okay.
Curtis Mayfield and my dad grew up together in Cabrini Green Projects in Chicago.
Wow. And
Curtis wrote just about all of my dad's hits. And then Elton John got his start playing piano behind my dad.
Wow.
And then the Beatles, my daddy used to tell me the story, so you got to remember this, your daughter, that she believes you. He used to tell me he opened for the Beatles. I was like, okay. But, that was before the internet. But somebody sent me a picture one day. So if you Google Major Lance and Beatles, you'll see Paul McCartney walking off of the plane when they returned back to England after their big tour in America. And he has my dad's album under his arm.
Wow, that is so cool. So you mean so your dad was a songwriter, producer, and I'm hearing that you grew up in England. I never knew this. What is that about?
So they had something called like the Northern Soul craze. So when a lot of the artists like my dad who were popular in the 60s, when their popularity started to wane, they were still very, very popular in England. If you remember, I don't know if you remember this, but Marvin Gaye moved to England at one
point. Really? I never knew that.
So they could have a whole new career in England. And my parents were very adventurous. They packed us up and they moved us to England. Wow. And that's where my first memories are. So it was a wonderful experience. And when I was in law school, I had a chance to go back and visit the neighborhood and the people who used to keep me. And it was, lifelong memories and friends.
So you got a taste of the culture, the food.
I was really young, but okay. I just, like I said, those were my earliest memories. I remember my dad performing at this place called The Torch. It was an iconic venue in England. And like I said, Elton John got his start playing behind my dad. I met him last year. He was in Atlanta doing some work with his AIDS Foundation. And I said, hey, I'm Major Lance's daughter. And he starts singing one of my dad's songs.
Wow.
And he tells me the story about playing piano behind my dad on tour, and they toured all over Europe. And he said, and at the end of the tour, your dad took off his tie and gave it to me. And he described the tie. So, of course, I just burst out crying. But he came to my dad's funeral, and we had a memorial service in Atlanta at Dawson Mortuary on ML King. So you can imagine it was just Black people in there. And I see these two white guys, and they're dressed kind of, flamboyant. I'm like, oh, that was nice of those two white guys to come to Daddy's funeral from his band. And it was Elton John and somebody, and maybe his partner. So,
wow, that's cool.
So but all that goes back to our time in England.
Wow, that's what's up. So you mean to tell me Mr. Sexual Healing moved to England too?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. A lot of the 1960 artists, they had a whole new life there.
Wow.
And I asked my mom all the time why we came back, and she said she just got homesick. She just wanted to come back home.
Yeah, got to come back home to Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
It is. So your father went to jail. When he went to jail, as a young black woman, like, did that affect you in any way as far as, you pursuing your dreams and just getting to where you at now?
When he went to prison, that was the most devastating thing in my life. I'd never lost anybody through death at that time,
Okay.
but that was like, it was the death of our family. And when we came back from England, and in hindsight, because back then kids just didn't get to be all in the people's business. I just remember, like, all our stuff didn't come back with us. And I remember hearing them saying, we couldn't afford to pay the airline to get all the stuff back. It was some convoluted story, but in hindsight, clearly we were having financial problems. So my dad started selling drugs. My dad, would always tell a story about how bad his record deals are structured. And he was working in a pharmacy when he hit it big, and he was like, by the time he paid everybody and paid for the tour and this and that, he was like, he was making more money sweeping in the pharmacy than he was being this #1 artist. So he didn't have a college education. All he knew was music, and he did what he needed to do. And he never blamed anybody. He always accepted responsibility. But I mean, that was the end of our family as I knew it. I came home from school one day. I was 8. And my dad used to be at home because he worked at night. And they were taking him out in handcuffs. And we had moved out of our house. Again, I now know, like, we had lost our house to foreclosure. We were living in an apartment, Club Candlewood Apartments. And they had just torn up the apartment, and they had torn up my toy box, and they were looking wherever they could look for where he might be hiding drugs. And after that, every weekend, went from going to ballet and all that good stuff on weekends to visiting my dad in prison across Georgia.
Wow. So under those circumstances, like, you came out and it seems like you didn't let any of that phase you, because obviously you're more than successful today. To anyone that's looking, you didn't fall victim to, like, the circumstances. What do you attribute that to?
The grace of God. That's it. Like, I can't say the same for all of my siblings. Some people emulate behavior, and some people want the exact opposite of what they see. I always wanted stability. I remember I used to go home from school every day with one of my friends, Tracy Smith, and I would look in the car while her dad was driving. He always had a full tank of gas, and I used to be mesmerized by that.
By the full tank of gas?
By the full tank
Wow.
of gas. Funny the impression you have on kids.
Right.
And I was like, when I get grown, I'm going to always have a full tank of gas. Why? Because my mama used to always run out of gas.
Wow.
And we would have to walk, and
Right.
And I was like, and now, like, if I pass a gas station, I'm filling
up.
And my grandparents were always stability for me. So we were always moving, but my grandparents lived in the same house, for 50 years, and you could always go to them when you needed something. They didn't have a lot, but they lived below their means and always had something to give, and, like, that's what I always wanted. So that just always inspired me to do the right thing, or at least try to.
That's right. I feel you on that gas, though, because when I was growing up, my uncle gave me a beef jerky and a soda, and I was like, when I used to come home, my dad and my mom never had that, and I was like, man, when I grow up and I get money, I'm gonna have a refrigerator full of sodas and a closet full of beef jerkies.
When I tell you going to Costco,
right?
Like going to Neiman Marcus for me, I'm like, we're gonna buy some tissue,
right?
we're gonna have some cake, because Mr. Smith had all that laid out in his house.
Yes, and I feel you too on your, because my grandmother basically raised me, and you're right. It was the stability. It's no matter what, it was gonna be food in the kitchen. It was gonna be somewhere to sleep. It's gonna be a hot bath, and you was going to church on Sunday, like, you knew that. and that's what kind of gave me my values and morals just coming up, because she did have a lot of sidebar conversations with me about things that I did, but I believed what she told me because she had stability. And it's like the one person that was never worried, and like she was never weary about anything. She always say, God gonna figure it out, baby, don't worry about it. And go back there and pray.
Yeah.
And that's that. So in your pursuit to where you are now, because we all have those moments, and I'm quite sure there's a lot of young black women out here watching, is there ever been a time where you felt like giving up, like you was just like, you know what, I just can't even do this anymore? I mean, coming out of school or just like getting into politics and kind of just feeling the tension of how hard it is for women to be in politics, or any of that time?
You know, I look back in college, like I put a lot of pressure on myself to be perfect. And
Mm,
it manifested itself in various ways. Because the flip to that was when everything is so much in upheaval, you want to present and look like everything's just fine all the time, when we're never all just fine all the time.
right,
So
right.
it's like when my back gets pushed against the wall is when I fight the hardest.
Mm,
That's that scrapper in me.
right.
But so I've never wanted to quit in that regard, but I have had to be forgiving of myself. And thankfully, as I've gotten older and matured, I now live in the gray. I see that everything
Right.
is not black, everything is not white.
Mm,
I'm not as judgmental as I used to be, and I'd never do that and that. Like, yeah, you would,
right, right.
So I think that's maturity too. But so I can't say like I'm not a quitter. That's when I fight the hardest, when I think somebody's trying to make me quit.
Mm,
And it's great when it's for a good cause or something healthy, but it can be self-destructive too.
right, right. Now I can sense that about you though, just seeing how you handle things and go, because it's got to be a lot of added pressure, because you are a woman and you are in a position of power, so you got to be super strong. Like it's this woman movement going on right now. They like they taking over the world. I'm like, wow. You know what I mean? Like, okay.
I was like I said, my son came in at 2:30 in the morning, and I had something on my mind that was bothering me all night, and I couldn't go back to sleep. So by 7 o'clock, I had shot off a text message, like, and they got it.
Right.
And I was like, I ain't gonna be the only one that ain't sleeping right here.
That's right.
So, I think that's the Southern thing too.
Right.
We're very polite and but until we're not.
Right, right. That's what my grandma used to tell me. Like, be respectful until they show you that they're not being respectful. Then go above and be beyond to show them why you should be respected. And I live by that.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, you don't have to start with that, but
right.
you still got to finish with
right,
it.
right. That's my motto.